Hello, dear comrades. Today, we begin reading the sufficiently general theory of management. This is the core of the public safety concept, dead water. This course on the sufficiently general theory of management is very important. We need to understand the processes of how management is carried out not only in the social environment, in society, but also all processes in the universe. In other words, this is a very interesting course. And those who master the sufficiently general theory of management, the basic elements, those who understand the sufficiently general theory of management have a good grasp of the processes occurring. They understand the mechanisms of how and what happens, the causes and effects. Well, we will begin our examination of this course with the tasks that are solved by the sufficiently general theory of management, that is, the terminological apparatus. First, the theoretical apparatus of the sufficiently general theory of management is the most general. It is an apparatus for describing all processes. With the help of the terminological apparatus of the sufficiently general theory of management, one can describe natural processes, biological processes, technical processes, social processes, and so on. The terminological apparatus allows one to stand on the foundation of all specific sciences for those who use this apparatus. It enables entry into any science. Well, I can say that once you master the terminological apparatus of the sufficiently general theory of management, you can read textbooks on other subjects and understand what they are about. One does not need to understand specific terms, but it is very easy to grasp what is being discussed, whether in chemistry, biology, or especially in social processes. It allows finding a common language with all specialists. What is the problem now? Each specialist from their own system of knowledge, from a narrow field, cannot find a common language with a specialist from another area of knowledge. And even when mathematicians meet, a specialist in one area of mathematics does not understand what a specialist in another area of mathematics is saying. I won't even mention physicists and humanists. That is, humanitarians do not understand techies at all. And the terminological framework, sufficiently general control theory, allows communication using a common conceptual apparatus for specialists from various fields of knowledge. The sufficiently general theory of control considers the common aspects in the substantive side of the most diverse processes. And this common aspect is related to the object-image process of thinking. Therefore, based on this, the thesis of those supporters of the concept of public safety who understand this is that they say, we do not prove anything to anyone because we provide this knowledge, and each person either accepts it or does not accept it, because object-image thinking is such that either a person perceives all of this, or as the song goes, they are not given to understand. By the vine, remember that on a small raft, what suddenly happened to me, yes, and some do not understand this wholeness. Therefore, in principle, the sufficiently general theory of control should be taught from childhood. Now, such methodologies are being developed, not to mention that the sufficiently general theory of control must be taught in all higher educational institutions. And as a rule, it should be taught in the first years so that later, possessing an understanding of all processes, people, students, can evaluate what is happening in various spheres of societal activity. The sufficiently general theory of control states that there is a hierarchy of management. And here it is important to note, management, if you think about its very meaning, is management. That is, it is a right. And the second element is will. Management, that is, there can be no management without will. And will is freedom in understanding. That's it. By the way, there is a difference in the conceptual apparatus of what freedom is and what will is. If you remember, Stenka Razin and Shukshin wrote a novel called I Came to Give You Will, not freedom, because if we talk about freedom, we need to define what freedom is. After all, A person's freedom ends with their receptors, that is, a person is free to perceive the surrounding world. With the tips of their fingers, sight, hearing, smell, and touch. That is, they perceive the surrounding world, and in this they are free. And for one, bright light is enough, for another, it is not enough. For one, sour, and for another, not sour. For one, sweet, and for another, not sweet. That is, freedom lies in a person's perception of the surrounding world. But beyond that, a person is not free. Why? Because he lives in society and everything in principle has already been created for him. That is, he cannot say to the camera, "There is a cow in front of me." Therefore, freedom lies precisely in a person's perception of the surrounding world. And he gives an assessment taking into account the culture in which he is situated. The task of management is solved by reason, and reason can be both individual and collective. We will talk about collective reason a little later, but for now let's limit ourselves to this thesis. And the tasks of management in relation to hierarchically lower systems can be either management tasks or self-management tasks. And so the tasks of management are solved in relation to hierarchically lower systems. Here, in relation to the universe, a simple picture is drawn. Look, there is a person living on planet Earth. Planet Earth exists in the solar system, and the solar system exists in the universe, and so on. Here in the hierarchy, we will rise to the hierarchically highest encompassing management. And what happens? The dominating factors of the environment in which a person lives, that is, the biological system, the biosphere, dominates over the person, meaning it somehow manages him. Let's say, if there is no oxygen in the atmosphere on Earth, a person will die. And where does oxygen come from? From the leaves of trees, as we learned in school. And why do leaves exist on trees? Because the sun shines. That is, it turns out that the sun exerts its controlling influence on the biosphere, and so on, and the sun oscillates in the universe. Therefore, even here, in such a simple example, the hierarchy of management is evident. And those who try to oppose this hierarchy, well, against, as I have already said, you cannot go against God. That is, the same can be said for other examples from different areas of life, including people. The task of self-management, this is when, within the limits of a hierarchically higher encompassing management. For example, the tasks of managing a company, a factory, or a state on the planet Earth are addressed. But if these issues are resolved in harmony with the hierarchically higher encompassing management, it's one situation. If not in harmony, then it's a different situation. Then, like in Blocks and the Wild Fairy Tale, there was a failure for them in both Lisbon and Messina. Therefore, any process in the universe can be seen as either a process of management or self-management. But since the people who come into contact with the concept of public safety are very diverse, many of them do not understand at all what management is, what an object of management is, and what a subject of management is. Technocrats understand this quickly, but for people associated with humanitarian disciplines, it is difficult. Now we will consider the simplest management scheme. Well, everyone knows the management scheme of a car. Here is a car. This is called the object of management. There is a driver who manages this car. This is scientifically called the subject of management. So the driver presses the pedals with their feet, pushes buttons with their hands, steers the wheel, as kids say, thus managing the car. This is a direct connection, that is, a direct controlling influence. This is called a direct connection. Thus, a person evaluates the condition of the car using sight, hearing, and smell. That is, he looks at the instrument panel with his eyes and sees, there is this much fuel, the speed is this. So, he looks at the road and sees some bumps, a traffic light. He assesses the situation on the road. All of this is called feedback. So, well, vision, or rather, this is vision, what is obvious. He hears with his ears how the car, there, the engine is working fine, whether the bearings are knocking or not, or something else. Touch, gasoline is leaking somewhere, or what kind of smells. So he assesses. All of this is called feedback, since the car is not moving. In a vacuum, although there is also an environment there, that is, there is a road, it can be raining, there can be fog, traffic lights, all that surrounds the car, neighboring objects. This is called the environment. That is, the car moves in the environment. And look, from the perspective of this, and so this is the control object. The driver is the control subject. This red line is the direct connection. These are the control actions at the output. The result is obtained. So the result is assessed by the control subject. This is called feedback. Here is a diagram for you. And since all of this operates in some environment, it's raining, there is fog, police officers, bumps on the road, something else. So all of this is called the surrounding environment. Here, look, what is the most general control scheme? There is a control object and a control subject. There is an environment, there are control actions, a result, feedback on the control object. Here is the scheme in its most general form, but it is also important to understand something else. And where is the hierarchy of control here, you may ask? It exists. So let's think about it. A driver in a Zhiguli is heading to the market. Well, we can limit the consideration like this. He went to buy groceries. And why did he go, the driver? It turns out his wife ordered him, "Come on, Vasya, go, we are out of groceries." So it turns out that Vasya is following the instructions of a higher management structure. And why did the wife order him to go for groceries, Vasya? Because the groceries ran out. And why did the groceries run out? Because there was no money. So it turns out. And why was there no money? Because the company wasn't paying salaries. And why wasn't the company paying salaries? Because the products couldn't be sold. Nobody is buying them. And why aren't they buying the products? Because foreign products are better. Thank you. So there is a video recorder or something else. So if we rise through this hierarchy, we will reach global politics. This is from an economic perspective. So this management hierarchy will inevitably lead us to a certain structure. It turns out there are no unmanaged processes. That is, what seems like randomness at first glance is actually integrated into a certain management hierarchy. This is also something to know. The management scheme in society. Well, a person is an object of management by society. If we look at any process, let's start with the simplest one, since we will not be talking about any abstractions. But first and foremost, people are interested in what is happening in the life of our society. So there is a person. Management influences and information transfers affect him, such as family and friends. That is, bosses, culture, the education system, books, and so on. That is, the whole society, which carries a certain culture with its morality, exerts its management influence on a person. The result is produced. The result is evaluated or not evaluated if there is no feedback. If we return to the previous picture, it turns out that why is feedback needed? To ensure the system operates stably, it is necessary to know what result is produced. If the driver does not monitor that he is running out of gas, the car will stop and he won't be able to go further. That is, one must keep track of the condition. If he does not see that there is a pit ahead or that the traffic light is red, he will get into an accident. That is, one must always assess the quality of their management. This is feedback. If there is no feedback, the system perishes. So here, society influences the individual, resulting in an outcome. And now let's say our entire society evaluates. So, what kind of people does it prepare? Journalists who exert their controlling influence do not even realize that they are exerting this influence. I won't even mention the result of their controlling influence. That is, there is no evaluation. But it should be understood that this scheme operates within the limits of hierarchically higher management. That is, in relation to this entire system, the environment acts on it, including forests, seas, rivers, various oscillatory processes, nutrition, water. All of this affects a person up to God, who exerts his influence. How? In fact, it exerts influence on society. That is, this is the hierarchically higher encompassing management. Therefore, one must always remember, when considering and isolating any management scheme, one must remember that this scheme operates within the bounds of hierarchically higher encompassing management. A person is managed by society, just as society is managed by each individual person now, society itself, and who manages society. Yes, and we say that the state authorities exert their governing influence on society. That is by creating special laws, decrees, making decisions, and developing certain structures. All of this has a certain impact on society. We must live. The media in particular exerts its governing influence on society as a whole, resulting in either a good or bad outcome, which is a big question. Now back to you. Do you think our state in which we live evaluates the results it receives or not? That is there feedback? Do those who manage social processes understand what is happening, where society is heading, and what they are getting as a result? Think about it, homework. I won't reveal all of these. Next, we will look at these things in more detail. Now let's see how to formalize this management process. The management that occurs in society always implies a subjective choice of management goals. That is, if there is a certain process. Well, let's always use examples. Although in principle, any process in the universe can be managed, whether it's an electron, a molecule, a planet, or a comet, and we will approach it. But we will mainly take examples from our human life. Here is a student. By the way, they are taking exams now. It's June, graduation exams. And here is a student who studied, meaning he was in some process. And now, many students, having finished school, are faced with the choice of where to go. They have many options before them. That is, they can choose a goal. One says, I will go serve in the army. Another says, I will go serve in the police. The third says, I will go study. The fourth says, I will go and work at a factory. Many options exist. And each person chooses depending on their understanding, morality, and their interests in general. That is, it depends on the individuality of the person and the subjective choice of one's goal is made from a multitude of objective possible options for the development of the process. And it should be remembered that this process of a person's further life, many factors influence this process, including family well-being, whether someone can study, financial support, parental advice, and the situation in the city, whether there is work in the city or not. Thus, numerous factors affect the development of this process. Therefore, if the management of this process is known, if the laws of existence of this very process in the environment are known, and if the entire set of internal and external factors that determine the development and course of this process is known, then management is possible. There is such an option, and it is very interesting. A certain little person, as drawn here, creates an illusion of a certain process for himself. And if he has created an illusion of the existence of a certain object that he controls, he has the illusion of controlling this object. But since he has created this illusion for himself, his disappointment will be quite real, meaning it will turn out to be a bust. What does this picture illustrate? One should not create illusions for oneself. Here is an image. You know, there are children who play war, they sit on a stick, and there are even toys with a horse's head. And so on the stick, they wave a saber and play war. And if you disappoint that child saying, "But you don't have a horse, you're just riding on an ordinary stick," some of them might cry, so to speak. In other words, you have dispelled his illusion, his flight of fancy. If we now transfer this children's game to more serious matters, then our Democrats, democratizers, reformers, the global backstage, has created the illusion for them that they are building democracy in Russia. And they truly believe that they are building democracy, meaning they are riding on that very stick. Thus, they have created an illusion of an object of control for themselves, meaning they are creating democracy. They have the illusion that they are managing the country. There it is, the illusion of control. But as you can see, their disappointment is quite real. Poof! How is this done? We will also get acquainted with this.